did your golden child, sister, do something to sabotage your recovering brother's big moment? I need to vent. I literally cannot sleep, and I'm sitting on my 2018 Honda Civic in the Costco parking lot because I cannot handle another minute in apartment 3B right now. My iPhone 14 battery is at 4%, and I have 67 unread texts. I just need to type this out before I combust. Get this, my younger brother, David Foster, 45M, who's a recovering addict and honestly the sweetest guy once he stabilized, is about to finally get his life together. He's been clean for almost 3 years now, which is a miracle TBH. And my sister, Danielle Williams, 47F, the golden child, the literal light of our parents' lives, just pulled the most insane, manipulative stunt I have ever witnessed. And it all went down during our monthly mandated family game night. I'm Denise Watson, 49F, and I am the eldest. I'm also, according to my therapist, an anxiety warrior, which basically means I spend 90% of my energy bracing for the next catastrophe my family will inevitably create. For 49 years, I've been the responsible one, the boring one, the one who handles the logistics and the rent and the actual bills, while David was the project and Danielle was the success story. I should have known Tuesday night was going to be a disaster when I spent $43.67 at Trader Joe's trying to find enough vaguely healthy snacks to appease David, who is tracking macros, bless his heart, and enough expensive cheese and wine for Danielle, who only drinks $30 Pinot Grigio and judges everything else. Our parents, God love them, insist on this monthly game night. It's usually held at my tiny apartment, which I split the $1,247 rent on with my cat, Mittens. It's cramped, the AC is struggling, and I had to pay an emergency $85 plumber charge last week because David accidentally flushed his Invisalign case down the toilet last time he was over. But whatever, family. This time, the agenda was supposed to be celebrating David. Just got approved for a pretty serious promotion at the warehouse, and he's finally chipping away at the debt he accumulated 5 years ago. He's doing everything right. He's going to meetings, he's crushing it at work, he even saved up $200 from his last check for a new guitar. I was so proud, you guys. Genuinely, wholeheartedly proud. Danielle, however, was clearly not thrilled. Danielle Williams, 47F, is the definition of a breadcrumber. Is gorgeous, has the perfect job, something corporate that involves travel and talking about synergy, and is married to a doctor who pays for her Peloton membership and her new BMW she drives, but can't actually afford if her husband left her. She loves praise. She needs praise. And when David started getting positive attention, Danielle started to twitch. The night started fine. We ordered Chipotle, my treat, another $34.50 I won't get reimbursed for. David was telling us about the job, and I was making an effort to not interrupt him. Mom and Dad were beaming, and even Danielle was forcing a smile, swirling her Pinot Grigio. Seriously, D, Dad said, clanking David's sparkling water glass with his own beer. 3 years. You've really turned things around. You're inspiring. David literally glowed. I haven't seen him look this relaxed since he was 15. And Danielle took a dramatic sip of wine, looked directly at David and said, "It's good that David is stable now, of course. We were all so worried, weren't we, Mom?" I felt my chest tight. That's Danielle's signature move, compliment with a kickback. A subtle reminder of the chaos he created, even as he recovers. I jumped in, trying to derail the judgment train. Speaking of stable, David, did you get the lease signed for that new place you were looking at? The one near the coffee shop on Main Street. David grinned. Yeah, I signed it Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. It's a 12-month lease. I got the security deposit sorted, and I even have enough for the first month's rent. My share is only $980, which is manageable. My heart swelled. This was huge. Complete, verifiable independence. Oh, the coffee shop place, Danielle hummed, completely ignoring David's excitement. She fiddled with her Apple Watch for a second, then looked up, her face perfectly composed in that sweet martyr expression she perfected in high school. Well, that's just wonderful news, David, she said, dripping with saccharine sincerity. Just wonderful timing, actually, because I have some news too. My anxiety level went from 4 to a solid 9 instantly. I grabbed another handful of sour cream and onion chips. Whenever Danielle has news, it means she's about to either launch a new pyramid scheme or announce something that requires us to drop everything and praise her for 72 hours straight. She stood up from the IKEA chair and placed both hands over her perfectly flat stomach. She looked straight at Mom and Dad, bypassing David and me entirely. I actually have a little bun in the oven, she announced, beaming. Surprise, we're due in December. Silence. Could hear David nervously tapping his foot under the table. Mom started making the strangled noise that was half squeal, half sob. Dad immediately jumped up to hug Danielle, practically lifting her off the ground. A baby? Oh my God, a grandchild, Dad kept repeating. This is incredible. You knew, didn't you, honey? He asked Mom. I suspected, Mom whispered, tearing up and running over to join the hug fest. You just have that glow, darling. The perfect timing, honestly. Perfect timing. I glanced at David, 45M. His face had gone from triumphant joy to that familiar, defeated mask he wears when he expects disappointment. He just announced signing a 12-month lease, finally achieving the adult milestone everyone wanted for him, and Danielle had literally bulldozed him with a pregnancy reveal. And she knew about his lease signing, BTW. We were texting about it all morning. I saw the texts on his cracked Samsung Galaxy screen. I tried to regain control of the narrative, the designated anxiety warrior protecting the little recovering brother. Wow, that's huge, Danielle. Congratulations, I said, trying to make my voice sound enthusiastic instead of like I wanted to throw my Talenti gelato straight at her head. That's wonderful news, isn't it? Danielle replied, brushing a stray piece of hair back. I was a little nervous about announcing it, to be honest. I mean, my career is really taking off, and I know it's not ideal timing for everyone, but we decided to just go for it. She said not ideal timing for everyone while staring directly at David, who was now staring at his hands. Mom pulled away from the hug, looking at Danielle with pure adoration. Oh, honey, don't worry about timing. This is what matters. This is a blessing. David, isn't this lovely? David just nodded mutely. That's when Danielle's husband, Mark, 50M, the doctor, who usually only communicates via email, walked into the kitchen carrying a massive cake box from a fancy bakery. We also had a little talk about logistics, Mark announced, cutting into David's spotlight even further. He placed the cake down. And we have a special request for the family, especially for you, David. David looked up, wary. Mark smiled this oily, self-satisfied smile. Since Danielle is going to be high risk due to her age and she's going to need a lot of support, we really think she needs to focus entirely on the pregnancy and not stress about anything else. So we decided she's going to need a full-time, dedicated assistant for the next 9 months. I literally thought they want David to quit his job. I felt the acid rise in my throat. An assistant? Dad asked, intrigued. Yes, Danielle chimed in. Mark is too busy with his practice and Denise is busy with her career path. She always dismisses my job in procurement as cute part-time work, which whatever I support myself entirely, NGL. But David, she paused, looking at him with wide, innocent eyes. David is flexible. He's been talking about that promotion, but honestly, David, this is family. This is your niece or nephew. David stared at her. Wait, you want me to be your assistant? What does that even mean? Means you put the promotion on hold for a year, David? Mark clarified cheerfully. Danielle needs someone to handle the house, the appointments, the errands, the grocery runs, you know, the stressful stuff. It's too much for her right now. And since you're already so flexible with your AA meetings and your recovery schedule, we figured it would be a perfect fit. I nearly choked on a chip. Flexible with his AA meetings. It's literally the most important, rigid part of his schedule, you horrible person. David, however, was already wilting. The golden child syndrome was activating in his brain. The idea that he could finally be useful, finally be the savior instead of the burden was clearly tempting him, despite the colossal personal cost. We would pay you, of course, Danielle added quickly, sensing his hesitation. A decent living wage. Say $2,000 a month, tax-free. $2,000 a month. That's barely what David makes now, and it's definitely not enough to cover the $980 rent on his new apartment, plus utilities and food. He's currently making about $3,200 post-tax at the warehouse. This was a massive step backward, disguised as a noble family duty. Danielle, wait a minute, I interrupted, putting my foot down hard. My hands were shaking, the anxiety spiking into full-blown anger. David just signed a lease. Just got a promotion. He is stable. You cannot ask him to jeopardize his entire recovery structure for 9 months of fetch work. Danielle looked at me like I had ruined Christmas. Denise, really? Are you always going to be so dramatic? It's a temporary arrangement. This is his family. This is what we do for family. Mom immediately backed her up. Denise, you're overreacting. This is a beautiful opportunity for David to give back after everything we've done for him. He can always go back to the warehouse later. I looked at my parents. They genuinely believed this was a selfless act of familial love. They couldn't see the manipulation. Danielle had weaponized her pregnancy, immediately turning David's sobriety and success into a deficit resource that must be deployed for her benefit. It was the golden child move perfected. David, the recovering addict, could only redeem himself by serving the successful sister. Dad, no, I insisted, standing up, knocking my chair back. This isn't an opportunity. This is a pregnancy trap. You are sacrificing David's future because Danielle is too lazy to hire a real nanny or run her own errands. Mark immediately stepped between us. Denise, that's uncalled for. Danielle is high risk, and David needs structure. We're providing that structure. Plus, he gets to live rent-free with us in the guest house near Mom and Dad's house in Westfield. Won't have to worry about the lease he just signed. I looked at David. He looked completely trapped. He was staring at the floor, processing the sudden, total destruction of his independence. His brand new 12-month lease was now a problem that had to be solved, not a triumph to be celebrated. David, look at me, I said, my voice low and urgent. You cannot do this. You have worked too hard, tell them no. David looked up, his eyes glassy. But maybe they're right, Denise. I mean, it is family. And Mark said I could stay in the guest house. I wouldn't have to pay $1,247 to break the lease on the new place. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. I was done, just done. The sheer generational conditioning of golden child syndrome had won again. The burden of David's past meant he could never fully own his future if Danielle needed something. You know what? I can't, I told them, picking up my keys and my beat-up Trader Joe's reusable bag. I cannot watch this. This is the most disgusting thing I have ever seen. You are using him, Danielle. And Mom and Dad, you're enabling it because she's giving you a grandkid and David is the one who always has to sacrifice. I walked to the door. I heard Dad calling my name, telling me to calm down and apologize to Danielle. I slammed the door and literally ran out of apartment 3B. I didn't even grab my Hulu password login book. I got into my Honda Civic, drove past the Starbucks on the corner and ended up here at Costco because it felt safe and brightly lit. That was 45 minutes ago. I've been fielding texts from my family ever since. I'm talking 27 calls in 1 hour from Mom. Texts from Dad saying, your sister is crying, you need to call and apologize, she is high risk. And then, 5 minutes ago, I got this text from David. David, I'm sorry, Denise, but I told Mark and Danielle yes. I called the landlord for the place on Main Street and explained I couldn't take the lease after all. I told them I would pay the $1,247 for the first month since I signed. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to throw up on the steering wheel. That $1,247 was his entire savings. That was supposed to be his future. And now he's sacrificing that money and his job stability to be Danielle's glorified housekeeper, all because she wants to avoid stress. I texted him back, are you serious? You gave them everything? David, I had to. It's my nephew or niece, and they said if I do a good job maybe I can travel with them in the spring. I swear I saw red. I felt the rage I had been suppressing for 2 decades finally break through. I was so angry at Danielle, at my parents, and at David for folding so easily, though I knew it was decades of abuse talking. I immediately wanted to key Danielle's BMW. I wanted to post the entire story on Facebook and expose her. But then my anxiety kicked back in. What if I'm wrong? What if she really is high risk and I am being the selfish, dramatic eldest sister everyone always said I was? I took a shaky breath, checking my phone. The battery was at 2%, and I remembered something. About a month ago, Danielle had flown home from a work trip. She was acting weird. She was incredibly secretive about her phone. I was trying to download the Disney Plus app on her smart TV because she couldn't figure out the password, and while I was in the settings, a few of her recent web searches popped up on the suggested list. I didn't think much of it then. I was focused on the Disney Plus password. But now, sitting here in my car, replaying the perfect timing and the immediate demand for a full-time, housebound assistant, the words came flooding back. I remember 2 specific search phrases that made me raise an eyebrow because they were incredibly medical and incredibly specific. One was, cost of elective egg freezing procedure. Second one, and this is the part that literally made my entire body go cold, was the actual dramatic reveal. It wasn't the baby. It was the fact that she was hiding a monumental lie and using the concept of pregnancy to trap David and reclaim the spotlight. The exact search history I saw in the browser 5 weeks ago was, can a woman who has undergone egg retrieval still get pregnant naturally? And the most recent one, only 3 weeks ago, how soon after embryo transfer can I claim high-risk status? I looked at the text from David again. He signed his lease Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. Danielle announced her, surprise, high-risk pregnancy Tuesday night. I just had a horrible, gut-wrenching realization. I think Danielle didn't just get pregnant. I think Danielle performed a very expensive, carefully timed, and medically managed embryo transfer specifically to steal the attention from David's sobriety milestone and force him into being her servant. And if that's true, then everything she said about being high risk, everything about the surprise, everything about the perfect timing was a cold, calculated lie. I grabbed my keys, heart pounding. My phone was on 1%. I realized I knew exactly what my complication was, and I had to tell David immediately before he fully committed to Mark and Danielle. I hit the button to start the car, shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. I had to find David. I needed to tell him that Danielle's pregnancy wasn't a selfless blessing. It was a weapon designed to keep him small and beholden to her. Before I could even put the car in reverse, my phone beeped, flashing the low battery warning one last time before dying completely. The screen went dark, but not before I saw the last notification pop up. A new text from Mark, the doctor husband. It was one word, checked. Check what? I don't know. My phone is dead. I'm stuck here in the dark, and I have absolutely no idea what he means or what Danielle is planning, but I absolutely know that David is in danger. I am entirely alone. I have to get to him before they use that high-risk lie to lock him down completely. I swear, the universe hates my guts. Dead phone, 1% was a death sentence, not a warning, sitting in the dark, overheated Civic, smelling faintly of stale chips and existential dread. Mark's text, checked, was screaming in my brain. Checked what? The lease? David's commitment? The cost of the designer nursery rug? I needed a charger, a plan, and possibly a lobotomy. I realized I was parked next to the emergency air compressor station. I rooted around in my glove compartment, finding a disgusting coil of charging cable I bought at the airport 3 years ago. I managed to plug it into the car and my dead phone. It took 4 agonizing minutes for the screen to flicker back to life. 1%. Okay, let's go. I had to warn David immediately. I knew he was likely still at Mom and Dad's house in Westfield, or maybe already over at Mark and Danielle's guest house. They live 5 minutes from each other. Perfect manipulation proximity. I fired off the fastest text I could manage to David. Me Denise, do not sign anything else. Do not move into the guest house. Call me ASAP. Danielle lied. Check her search history. Embryo transfer. Not a surprise pregnancy. It was calculated. You are being trapped. Call me. I hit send. My phone immediately died again, sucking the last fragment of power the cable had managed to muster. I screamed. Not a cinematic scream, but a high-pitched, pathetic sound that probably startled the elderly woman walking her miniature schnauzer past my car. I spent the next hour sitting there, waiting for the battery to catch enough juice to power up for 2 minutes. This is my life now, waiting for battery life to dictate family emergencies. 2 hours later, I finally had enough power, 12%, Let's Geo, to check my messages and send another text. I had 83 unread messages. 41 were from Mom, 2 from Dad, mostly telling me to apologize, and 40 were from David. I opened David's texts first, bracing myself. David, 2 hours ago, Denise, I am at the guest house. Mark insisted I move the essentials tonight. It's actually pretty nice. They stocked the fridge. David, 1 hour ago, I am unpacking. Mom keeps calling to see if I need anything. She sounds so relieved. David, 45 minutes ago, what did you mean about the lease? Mark already spoke to the landlord. He said they paid the $1,247 and canceled the lease, but he's covering the penalty fee for me. Lies. Mark and Danielle made David pay the $1,247. I knew it. David, 20 minutes ago, Mark just showed me the contract for the assistant position. It's actually really detailed. I get $2,000 net plus use of their Tesla for errands. He said I need to sign it before I start tomorrow. David, 10 minutes ago, your texts are freaking me out. What search history? Why would she lie? She looks exhausted. She's really having morning sickness. I mean, she threw up twice when I was moving my guitar in. My heart sank. David was already deep in the golden child narrative. It didn't just move him in, they gave him an immediate contract to sign, locking him into the $2,000 salary that would never cover his independence again. And the sickness? Of course, she was performing. Or maybe she was sick because fertility treatments are brutal, NGL. I had to bypass the contract. I had to hit him with the proof immediately. Powered through the rest of the night, driving home only to grab my laptop and my ancient printer, and then immediately back to a 24-hour Dennis parking lot, better lighting and better vibes than Costco, TBH. The first thing I did was access the family shared cloud storage. We use it for old family photos, but Mark and Danielle, being tech-y and arrogant, used it to store important documents that Mark needed access to from his medical practice. Hacked in using the password I knew Danielle would never change, Mitten's birthday, which is 4/17 because she always steals my cat's spotlight too. I started searching for anything related to medical expenses, contracts, or dates. It took an hour, fueled by bad coffee and sheer rage. And there it was, a PDF titled, IVF Consultation and Payment Schedule D. Williams, dated 6 weeks ago. I opened it, shaking. It outlined the cost, $28,000, paid in 2 installments, one 7 weeks ago, one 4 weeks ago, the retrieval date 5 weeks ago, right before I saw the search history, and the exact transfer date. The transfer was scheduled for exactly 14 days before game night. 14 days. It's the perfect timeline for a positive pregnancy test and the start of intense progesterone treatments, which incidentally cause extreme nausea and exhaustion, perfect for faking high-risk status and morning sickness. It wasn't a spontaneous pregnancy. It was a $28,000, pre-planned, timed, attention-stealing missile aimed directly at David's independence. I printed the documents at Dennis. Cashier looked at me like I was insane, printing 14 pages of highly confidential medical billing at 3:30 a.m. Total cost, $4.20, another expense I will never recoup. This was the proof. This was the complication. Mark checked on. He probably checked that David had moved in and was ready to sign the contract, cementing his position as the permanent family burden. Fast forward to Friday morning. I couldn't go to work. Called in sick, telling my procurement boss I had a 48-hour flu. I spent the morning tracking David down. He had already started the assistant job. I drove out to Westfield. I drove directly to Mark and Danielle's pristine, gigantic house, the one with the professionally landscaped garden and the BMW sitting in the driveway. I found David in the guest house. He was meticulously vacuuming the entryway. He looked tired but weirdly content. He was wearing Mark's old, slightly too large polo shirt. The uniform of servitude, I realized. Denise, what are you doing here? He asked, shutting off the Dyson vacuum, looking nervous. Danielle said I need to minimize contact with negative energy right now because of the baby. Negative energy? I am your sister, David. I am the only one who gives a damn about your actual life, I hissed, stepping inside. The guest house was nicer than my actual apartment. It smelled like expensive candles and desperation. Look, I signed the contract this morning, David admitted, lowering his voice. I know you're mad, but it's actually a good arrangement. They need me, Denise, they really need me. And I can still go to my meetings. Mark said he'd even drive me if I can't get the Tesla. He was backsliding hard. He was embracing the identity of the useful servant rather than the independent adult. Golden Child Syndrome 1, Sobriety 0. I need you to look at this, I said, shoving the thick stack of printed documents into his hands. My hands were shaking again. He took them cautiously. He scanned the first page, IVF Consultation and Payment Schedule. What is this, a bill? He asked, confused. Read the dates, David. Read the procedure. She didn't get pregnant naturally. This wasn't a surprise. This was $28,000, $2 months in the making, and the transfer was timed to happen right after you signed your lease. She used $28,000 of medical science to steal your moment, David. This wasn't a blessing. It was a strategic maneuver. David sat down heavily on the edge of the perfectly made bed. He looked at the paperwork, specifically the payment dates and the transfer schedule. The color drained from his face. No, he whispered. No, she wouldn't. She's my sister. She's happy for me. Is she? Did she ever once call you back and say, that's wonderful about your lease, let's celebrate, but also I have big news? No, she waited until we were all captive, and she waited until she could use a life event to cancel out your achievement, I argued, my voice sharp. And Mark's text? Checked. He checked the transfer date, David. He checked the logistics, knowing that the timing was perfect to entrap you. David finally looked up at me, and his eyes were full of real pain, that particular kind of pain where years of denial are being shattered in one horrible moment. I gave them $1,247, he mumbled, clutching the contract in one hand and the IVF documents in the other. I gave them everything I saved. And they let you. They encouraged you. Because that money was just another barrier between you and total dependence on them, I stressed. You are not an assistant, David. You are a captive audience. You are the family resource being used up because they think they own you. He started crying, silent tears just tracking down his face. What am I going to do? I signed the contract. I moved in. You leave, I stated simply. We leave, you rip up that contract, and you get out of this guest house before they ask you to move your AA meetings to their private schedule. Just as David started to nod, the door swung open. It was Danielle, looking radiant, wearing a Lululemon maternity tank top, even though she was only a few weeks pregnant, and holding a tiny cup of organic ginger tea. David, what's going on? I thought you were running errands, she said, her voice dropping instantly when she saw the papers in his hand and my face. Denise, what are you doing here? I told David he needs to limit stress, especially from you. Stress, I laughed, a raw, ugly sound. It'll show you stress, Danielle. David, stand up. David didn't move. He just stared at the documents. Danielle walked over slowly, eyes wide and innocent. What are those papers, honey? Is that from Mark's practice? You shouldn't be going through his files, that's private. It's not private, it's evidence, I snapped, pointing at the IVF receipt. You lied, you orchestrated this. You spent $28,000 to ensure your pregnancy coincided perfectly with David's promotion and lease signing so you could steal his future. Danielle froze. Her composure, which was always her shield, started to crack around the edges. She looked terrified, but only for a fraction of a second before the anger set in. "How dare you?" she shrieked, instantly switching to victim mode. "You broke into Mark's private files? That is highly illegal, Denise. You are going to ruin my life just because you're jealous you never had children and can't keep a steady partner. I don't care about the baby, Danielle. Care that you used a medical procedure and David's recovery history as a weapon to force him back into the role of family failure?" I yelled back. She turned to David, who was still staring at the floor. "David, honey, look at me. Yes, we did IVF. We had trouble conceiving. It's expensive and stressful. We kept it quiet because we didn't want this kind of drama. Denise is trying to take this beautiful moment and make it about her, as always. You know, she always resented me for being successful and happy." That's when David finally looked up. He was holding the contract in one hand and the IVF bill in the other. He looked at the $2,000 monthly salary and then at the $28,000 cost of the procedure. "You called me flexible because of my AA meetings," David said, his voice quiet, dangerously calm. "You made me choose between saving money for my own home and serving you, and this was all planned. High-risk status, the contract, moving me in immediately. We just wanted your help, Dee. It's family," Danielle pleaded, trying to touch his arm. David recoiled. "The $1,247 I paid to cancel the lease. Did you tell Mark to charge me for that, even though you were the reason I broke the lease?" Danielle's eyes flickered. "Well, Mark handled the logistics. It was the principle of the matter, David. You signed a legal document." "It was my entire savings," David whispered. He stood up, looking at her with an expression I had never seen before, not resentment, but clarity. He finally saw her, stripped of the golden glow our parents had bestowed upon her for 47 years. He slowly, deliberately picked up the $2,000 a month assistant contract Mark had forced him to sign, and he tore it cleanly in half, then in quarters, then into confetti. "I'm done being the family project," he said, dropping the pieces on the expensive white rug. "I'm done with this guest house. I'm done being your errand boy." Danielle was furious. "You ungrateful little addict. After everything we've done for you, Mark and I were doing you a favor, keeping you busy, keeping you accountable. Y'all regret this, David. Y'all be back on the streets in 6 months." That insult, "ungrateful little addict," was the final switch. "I have 3 years clean, Danielle. 3 years that you tried to erase in one night," David said, picking up his guitar case and his worn duffel bag. "You can keep the organic ginger tea. I am leaving. If you walk out that door, David, Mom and Dad will never speak to you again," she yelled after him. "Good," David replied, walking past me toward the door. "Then I won't have to listen to them enable you anymore." We walked out of the guest house and got into my Honda Civic. Danielle was standing in the doorway, shrieking into her phone about filing a police report against me for hacking her cloud storage. "Go ahead, Danielle. Try explaining the IVF documents in court, NGL." We drove straight back to my apartment. So that was the big confrontation. It was messy, it was loud, and Danielle was exactly the monster I knew she was. But David was free. We were both shaking, but David was holding the ripped contract like a victory flag. Week went by where the world felt like the most hostile, stressful place on earth. Mom called 78 times. Dad sent me a truly terrifying email about familial loyalty and how I had destroyed my sister's happiness and jeopardized the life of their first grandchild. I blocked both of them. I changed my number. David did the same. The immediate problem, David was homeless and had $0 left, thanks to the $1,247 he paid the landlord. Second problem, I live in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with mittens and I can barely afford the $1,247 rent myself. "I'll couch surf," David offered, looking deflated the next morning. "I can find a meeting house or a cheap motel for a few days." "No," I insisted. "You don't need that stress. You need stability. We figure this out." I went into financial triage mode. Called my landlord, explained the situation very vaguely, like my recovering brother needs emergency housing due to a family crisis. And somehow, miraculously, she agreed to let David move in temporarily, split the difference, and put him on the lease next month. The new total rent would be $1,400, because roommates are expensive, apparently. David immediately started applying for new jobs. He didn't want to go back to the warehouse, which felt tainted now. He needed a fresh start. I had to deal with the fallout from Mark. I got a single, formal email from his law firm, threatening legal action over the document theft. I forwarded it to a friend's cousin who is a public defender. Cousin said, "They won't sue. They don't want the IVF details public, especially given Mark's practice and Danielle's corporate job talking about synergy. Tell them to pound sand." I politely replied to the law firm with 3 words, "See you in court." Backed off immediately. Update. This morning, 3 weeks after the Great Game Night Massacre, David got a job offer, not at a warehouse. He got a job as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized tech company. Starting salary, $65,000. That's $20,000 more than he was making at the warehouse. He accepted, literally crying on the phone in my living room. This was the success he deserved, the success Danielle tried to squash. His first paycheck comes in 3 weeks. You're operating on extremely tight margins until then. I'm eating ramen every night and I had to put $50 worth of gasoline on my emergency credit card. But we are safe. Denise Watson, the anxiety warrior, actually protected the project, TBH. A funny thing happened about 4 weeks after David moved in. David was genuinely thriving. He was going to meetings, crushing his new job, and he even bought a small bookshelf to put his recovery literature on. Mittens loves him. I, however, was miserable. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. Every phone call I took, I expected it to be Mom screaming. Every notification on my laptop, I expected it to be Mark's lawyer. I was functioning, but the anxiety had ratcheted up so high that I started having full-blown panic attacks in the break room at work. I realized I got David out, but I hadn't got me out. I was still in the city, still in the environment, still only 45 minutes from Westfield where I might run into my parents or, God forbid, Danielle and her ridiculously expensive stroller. My therapist, who I still see twice a week because this whole ordeal has made me a wreck, asked me a simple question last session. Denise, what is stopping you from leaving? I said, my job, the rent, my lease, my family. And she replied, none of those things are permanent. They are all logistics. It hit me like a truck. I was the master of logistics. I handled the bills, the leases, the appointments. I was keeping myself tethered to this toxic family dynamic because I thought I had to be the responsible anchor. I remembered the resolution approach. I used to fantasize about when I was 25 and Danielle got a scholarship I wanted. I wanted to move to a country where no one spoke English and start fresh. So I did something insane. Thing the old Denise would never, ever attempt. I started applying for jobs abroad. Specifically, I targeted procurement jobs in places known for being extremely calm, extremely structured, and very far away from the continental United States. I applied to 3 places: Ireland, New Zealand, and Switzerland. I figured it was a fun exercise, a daydream. But a week ago, I got a Zoom interview request for a mid-level procurement analyst position in Wellington, New Zealand. Salary was excellent and they were offering full visa sponsorship. I told David about it. He was folding laundry. Yes, David does his own laundry now, miracle of miracles. New Zealand, that's 18 hours ahead, he said, smiling. That's perfect. No one can reach you. I did the interview. I wore my best sensible blazer and I lied and said I loved rugby. I talked about streamlining supply chains and vendor management. I didn't mention my family trauma NGL. 3 days after that interview, I got the offer letter. Full relocation package, $88,000 USD equivalent salary, and a start date in 8 weeks. It felt terrifying. It felt like jumping off a very high cliff. But when I looked at the offer, I didn't see a job description. I saw a ticket out of the golden child syndrome circus. I accepted the job immediately. I signed the contract and emailed it back while drinking a cheap glass of wine on my balcony. I still had 8 weeks to manage the exit. I told David first. He was genuinely thrilled. Denise, you deserve this. Seriously, you spent your whole life protecting me and fixing mom and dad's mistakes. Go be selfish for once. I'm not selfish, I muttered. Yes, you are, he countered. And it's awesome. He even offered to handle breaking my lease and selling my Honda Civic once I was gone. It was finally taking responsibility, managing logistics, being the dependable adult I always knew he could be. He was free. The hardest logistical element was telling my parents. I couldn't just vanish. I decided on a neutral zone. I invited them to lunch at a non-chain Mediterranean restaurant near their house. David refused to come, which I respected. They arrived 15 minutes late, looking tense. Mom immediately started talking about Danielle, who is now 10 weeks pregnant and, according to her, so delicate Mark has had to hire a full-time chef to ensure she gets proper nutrition. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something, I interrupted before she could start detailing Danielle's daily vitamin regimen. You're going to apologize to your sister, aren't you? Dad asked, looking hopeful. She's been very upset, Denise. No, I said calmly. I am not apologizing. I'm moving to New Zealand. Silence. They stared at me like I had announced I was joining the circus. New Zealand? What are you talking about? Mom finally demanded. I accepted a job in Wellington. I leave in 8 weeks. I'm starting fresh. Dad was the first one to process the geographical distance. But the baby, y'all missed the birth, the christening. Denise, you can't just abandon your family for a job on the other side of the planet. You think I'm abandoning you? I asked, my voice flat. Leaving because this family dynamic is toxic, and I cannot be here anymore. For 49 years, I was the one who was supposed to be responsible, while you let Danielle use David's recovery as leverage and financial punishment. I was tired of being the anchor holding up the boat while everyone else drilled holes in the hull. Mom started crying immediately. You're taking David's side? You're choosing him over your sister and your grandbaby. I'm choosing my own mental health, Mom, I corrected her. And David is doing great, by the way. He has a new job, he's paying his half of the rent, and he's focused on his sobriety. He's thriving now that he doesn't have to worry about being Danielle's servant. I showed them the acceptance letter. I showed them my plane ticket confirmation. It was real. Dad looked genuinely bewildered. We thought you were happy here, Denise. We thought this was just a phase. It was a phase, I agreed. Phase where I thought my life's purpose was managing your emotional fallout and cleaning up after your golden child. That phase is over. I left the restaurant before they could launch into the full guilt trip routine. I paid for my own salad, BTW. I figured I owed myself that dignity. The aftermath was exactly what I expected. Danielle sent me a truly scathing text, calling me a coward and saying I was running away because I couldn't handle her success. I blocked her number without reading past the first sentence. Mom and Dad spent the next 2 weeks trying to talk me out of it, promising things would change, promising they would talk to Danielle, which is code for tell Danielle how much stress Denise is causing. I just didn't answer the phone. I focused entirely on packing, selling my things, and getting Mittens certified for international travel. Expensive and terrifying NGL. By Tuesday, 6 weeks into the process, I was almost entirely packed. David was officially on the lease, his first full paycheck had cleared, and he was completely independent. He even bought me an enormous, ridiculous travel pillow for the 18-hour flight. I did have one final moment of weakness. I saw Mark's Tesla parked outside a fancy baby boutique downtown. I was picking up some last-minute TSA-approved travel toiletries. I saw Danielle inside, talking to a sales associate about custom-made curtains for the nursery. She looked exactly the same, perfectly coiffed, radiating expensive entitlement. She still had that smug, satisfied smirk that drove me crazy. I wanted to walk in there and tell the entire store about the $28,000 deception. I wanted to tell them how she had tried to ruin her brother's life, but I didn't. I looked at her, I looked at the storefront, and I realized she's her problem, not mine. The only way I win is by stepping entirely off the battlefield. I turned around, paid for my tiny travel-sized toothbrush, and walked back to my car. That was my victory. recognizing the manipulation and choosing not to engage, even when the target was right there. The day before I left, David and I had a quiet takeout dinner in my nearly empty apartment. We ordered Indian food, something Danielle hates. "Thank you, Denise," David said genuinely. "If you hadn't showed up with those papers, I would be stuck in that guest house right now, trying to figure out which organic tea blend Danielle wanted, completely miserable." "You would have figured it out eventually," I told him, though I didn't believe it. "You're strong, David. You just needed permission to stop serving the golden child. You needed permission to stop being the family safety net," he countered, holding up his sparkling water glass for a toast. We toasted to independence. I left the next morning. David drove me to Lax. It was weirdly emotional saying goodbye, but it wasn't sad. It felt like a graduation. I am typing this now from a tiny, temporary flat in Wellington, New Zealand. Mittens is recovering from jet lag under the bed. It's early morning here, and the sun is just coming up over the harbor. It's beautiful, quiet, and absolutely, wonderfully far away. I still have anxiety. I still check my blocked numbers list sometimes. I still occasionally stress eat chips. But the overwhelming, choking anxiety that came from living under the shadow of Danielle's entitlement and my parents' enablement is gone. The last thing I did before I boarded the plane was check my personal email. There was one final message from Mark, the doctor husband. "No lawyers, no threats, just a quick note. Mark, Denise. We found the $28,000 IVF receipt. Danielle is hysterical. We are not high risk. You caused massive damage. Enjoy your new life. You will be missed by no one." I read that email, and for the first time since game night, I actually laughed out loud. Hysterical? Good. Not missed? Good. I didn't reply. I just deleted the email, turned off my phone, and settled in for the flight. I learned that sometimes the only way to set a healthy boundary is to put an ocean between yourself and the people who refuse to respect it. I didn't fix my family. I didn't get an apology from Danielle. I didn't get my $1,247 back for David. But David is free and stable, and I am finally, truly independent. I'm eating ramen every day until my first paycheck, but I'm sleeping peacefully, knowing that any drama happening back in apartment 3B or Westfield is literally a world away. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that my next game night will involve drinking Pinot Grigio by myself, looking at the Pacific Ocean, and definitely not having to worry about expensive cheese. We'll update if I see any sheep drama. TBH, anything is better than family drama. Denise, 49F, anxiety warrior turned New Zealand transplant, signing off.